Welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Namibia. Now, Israel has become the first UN member state to formally recognize the Republic, of Somaliland as an independent sovereign nation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signed a joint declaration with the Somaliland's president that is to provide for full diplomatic ties, embassies, cooperation in tech, agriculture, health and security. We're now joined via Zoom by South African political commentator, Mr. Donovan Williams, to speak about this development. Mr. Williams, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for making time to talk to us.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers in Namibia.
All right. Now, this development is framed in the spirit of the Abraham Accords, with Somaliland expressing readiness for joint. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, please explain what the Abraham Accords are and why Somaliland will feature there.
Well, essentially, the Abraham Accords are named after Abraham, who is a common person, as a first person in many ways. Well, a first person, the Abrahamic religions, which are in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So, hence, therefore, the Abraham Accords, and it is an accord which is essentially between Israel and brokered by the United States and Arab countries. Not all Arab countries are signatories of it, but it was championed in the first term of office by the President of the United States, then Donald Trump. It had a lull during the time of Joe Biden and has come back again during Donald Trump's second term. And there are a number of countries which are part of it. There are a number of countries opposed to it as well. But the Abraham Accords essentially is between what is termed Arab and Israeli, where you recognize Israel, and more than that, you basically connect each other's security to those countries. So by the recognition of Arab, it means it doesn't include Iran, which identifies as Persian. So in many ways, many commentators regard this security accord as anti-Iran and assists Israel in its terming or categorizing Iran as a threat to its own security. So it's a bit complicated in that way. Not all Arab countries have signed it, but not necessarily all Arab countries, because of the strength of the United States championing it, particularly its president, do fight against it. Like Saudi Arabia is not a signatory of it, and Saudi Arabia is a significant country, of course, in the Middle East. It does not make the Abraham Accord, as a problem for it. And so that's what gives also the force to the Abraham Accords. That's the first part. Ironically, though, as well, Israel, in its recognition of Somaliland, which now will also sign the Abraham Accords, as according to Israel when it announced that it is recognizing Somaliland, is that Israel has for the longest time put forward this matter of its right to exist as a Jewish state. But let's park aside the aspect of Jewish state for a while. Its right to exist, and any country's right to exist in real terms is basically other countries recognizing that right to exist, not the country by itself or its internal matter, and saying that we just have a right to exist. So it's, in a sense, if people can, it's like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
So Somaliland or Israel's right to exist is more dependent on other countries recognizing it. And Somaliland, for the longest time, since this idea that it should be its own country, has not been recognized by any other country as a country, except for the first time Israel is doing that. And in this sense, Israel is in a way admitting, which it won't want to say aloud, that your right to exist is always dependent on other countries recognizing you as a country, not by you just saying that you have a right to exist. That doesn't happen by itself. And as we know, within our continent of Africa, there are various parts of any country where there are people who believe that they should exist by themselves, they should have their own country. We have all those challenges. And if you have another country start to say, okay, Walvis Bay, we recognize you as the Republic of Walvis Bay, or we recognize you as the Republic of XYZ in South Africa, the trouble country when a third country starts to decide when they are recognizing somebody besides that, or a part of the country besides the sovereign country itself. That is the difficulty. I hope I've managed to give some type of layered understanding of that.
Yeah, but what had been your reaction when the news first broke?
Look, the reaction is that this is going to cause instability in that region. The region itself, East Africa, has a number of extra state forces, actors from Al Shabaab, which is in Somalia, to Boko Haram, which is in West Africa but links with Al Shabaab. You have a number of these types of actors. You also have tensions or historical conflicts between Eritrea and Ethiopia. This is from the time of colonialism to now. You have very large countries without access to the sea, and so that coastline where Somaliland is found, as well as Somalia, where Eritrea is, Djibouti is a very important coastline. It's known as the Gulf of Aden, as well as the Horn of Africa. And on the other side is known as the Arab Peninsula, where there is Yemen, who has been famous at this time, or notorious, which has been attacking on behalf of Palestine. So that peninsula is very important. And by the recognition of Somaliland by Israel, it scuppers whatever peace talks there was between Somalia and Somaliland, where there could have been a possibility of coming to some type of understanding where Somaliland and the people of Somaliland do not feel insecure, and do not feel that they are at peace, or in that scuppers whatever talks that were taking place, as minimal as they were. By Israel doing this, it means that other countries within that region who may have different geopolitical aspirations and oppose Somalia, notwithstanding that Somalia itself is a quite a country that hasn't had a stable government for decades now, will cause even greater problems. And that geopolitical region is very, very important for the world, not just Africa itself, but for the world. And so by Israel doing this, it really, really creates more problems. And I must say this, Israel is doing this in the wake of 2 to 3 weeks ago, the President of the United States attacked people of Somalian heritage within his own country. And then you have Israel recognizing Somaliland. So you have to start questioning in real terms that Israel, does it have a foreign policy, or is it just an agent of the United States? And I think, countries like ourselves, South Africa and Namibia, must also recognize and understand that we do have these tendencies, these challenges, that our geopolitical significance is only because we have sizable populations, or critical masses of people that may owe allegiance to places outside of our continent, to Europe or the United States and so forth. And that's what gives us more significance. Israel itself remains significant because they do not necessarily act in step in the region they come from, but act more in step with Western actors, particularly the United States.
Yeah, but from what you've just said, this entire development has been described as a strategic move, giving Israel access to Somaliland's Gulf of Aden coastline, which is basically located 300 kilometers from Yemen's Houthi. Now, an enemy of Israel and close allies of Iran. What do you make of this?
This is what I was saying. That geography means that Israel, an actor outside that region, is now firmly planted in that region through Somaliland. Regardless of the countries and how long they've been there, Israel has supplanted itself in, and it will act on behalf of the United States in that area. And more than that, more than just Yemen and so forth, understand that the Gulf of Aden moves so much of crude oil, tankers come through that area of crude oil to many parts. So when the Suez Canal has problems, because the Suez Canal, as we know, has that pipeline and so forth, but without it's the alternative to the Suez Canal that you have tankers that move from the Gulf of Aden, and that is very significant. So China gets affected, and this is why this is so important, because it's important because China and Iran gets affected, and this is what part of the reason that Israel is acting in this way. But the question then begs, and I'm sure our viewers also are asking this. This problem of Somaliland and Somalia has been a problem since the establishment of Somalia. Why haven't our leaders in Africa resolved this matter? And so, therefore, because they have been quite slow on the job, in a sense, lax, it has allowed a country like Israel, which doesn't have the interests of Somaliland or Somalia or the region itself, to enter it and cause the problems that it has caused right now. And our leaders in Africa, leaders from Namibia, South Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, and East Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, and so forth, must ask themselves that question. Because the more lax they are, the more they compete with each other, either internally in their countries and outside of that within the continent, the more that problems like this will be exploited by like countries like Israel. So our African leaders need to ask themselves those questions. Why have they been so lax? Why have they not resolved this matter and been focused on it and seized with it in real terms, so that a country like Israel, which does have the interests of Somali people completely in mind, that they are able to enter and cause the trouble that they have right now?
Yeah, but do you foresee that this would pave the way for setting up Israeli military bases in Somaliland?
More than just Israeli military bases. I mean, the United States is quite planted in that region through various countries. But it would be that, as we know, with the latest peace agreement brokered by Donald Trump again, that there is plans to move people from Gaza, in particular in Palestine, out of that area, so that it can be developed for the benefit of who we're not yet sure, but definitely not the people of Palestine. And there are talks about at least 1.5 million people being agreed to by Somaliland from Gaza to be moved to Somaliland, and that 1.5 million people would be all the people of Gaza. It's all the people of Palestine in Gaza, and so it's not just about resources and that, but it's about moving people from Palestine, making them even further stateless into an area like Somaliland itself. And then, of course, is that access to the sea that countries like Ethiopia, which yearn access to the sea itself, even Sudan, which really want access to the sea, and so forth, may start to look at Somaliland, ignoring Somaliland as being that possibility, and that in itself causing problems for the African Union, which has historically refused to accept that Somaliland has a right to exist, but asking for Somalia and Somaliland to settle their differences and come up with a solution. And that's at the end of the day is what should be found. Somalia, the people of Somalia and the people within Somaliland must come up with a solution. It shouldn't be anybody else who comes up with the solution.
Yeah. As we come to the end of our conversation, Mr. Williams, do you see this as a game changer for the Horn of Africa from your perspective?
Look, it is a game changer. It is a game changer because it reminds the African Union once again that you cannot just pass resolutions. You have to put actions attached to it. If you're going to say the guns must be silenced, you can't just say the guns must be silenced. It's not a decree. You have to put actions to it. It falls on countries like South Africa and Namibia, which are peace-loving countries, which are known to be peace-loving countries, not to be peace-loving just within their countries, just amongst themselves, but to really assist in regions outside of their neighborhood, that we can go ahead and try to broker peace, where some of the challenges there require just a little bit of conversation amongst countries or people to come to an understanding that you are not a threat if you are part of a country, if you need cooperation. Africa is vast, it is huge, it is a massive, massive continent, by far the largest continent. And there are lots of landlocked countries. The countries require cooperation amongst each other. And we are not going to get that if we do not have discussions, and those discussions need to be brokered by Africans. But this reminds us that Africans are not having these conversations. And that's why you have third parties outside the continent then interfering and which will cause problems like Israel has and the United States has done in other parts of our continent like the DRC and so forth, and which will not result in peace, but just result in areas that can be more easily exploited, and not in the benefit of Africa.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Williams, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for making time to talk to us, and all the best with the upcoming year.
Thank you, and to you as well, and your viewers have a great 2020-26.
All right. That was Donovan Williams, who is a political commentator all the way from South Africa, talking to us about Israel becoming the first UN member state to formally recognize the Republic of Somaliland as an independent sovereign nation. Now, on to more conversations. First National Bank has